Thanks, Raj, again. Our next presenter will be Dr. Harrison Pienaar. Harrison, I'll hand over to you now. Harrison will be presenting on Water-Energy-Food-Nexus and looking at the water-related research, particularly from the CSIR standpoint. And I did introduce to you what CSIR is. CSIR is one of the key industries in South Africa, or research entities in South Africa. Similar, by the way, to the CSIR in India, because there's also another CSIR in India. It's very similar to that. Over to you, Harrison.
Thank you so much, Prof, for the introduction. I'm just going to quickly share my screen. And if you can just give me an indication if it comes through on your side. I hope it's all clear on your side, Chair.
It's very clear on my side, Harrison. Sorry, I was on mute. It's very
no
clear
problem.
on my
side. Thank you so much, Chair. So my presentation will really just focus on the CSIR-related research in the Water-Energy-Nexus, which is the focus for this workshop. And of course, there are some linkages to the food nexus as well, but for the 2 days, I think we will be focusing on the Water-Energy-Nexus as indicated by yourself, Chair. This is part 1 of 2 presentations from the CSIR. My colleague Ashwin Sittal will also be presenting tomorrow, particularly with the intersectoral interlinkages with regards to the Water-Energy-Food-Nexus and the cross-collaborative work that we do in that particular space. Our work is centered within the water center, within the CSIR, in the Smart Places cluster. But Chair, you've also asked me just to give a snap into what the CSIR is all about, and I'll do that. Just in terms of my presentation outline, I'll have a look also at the strategic context of water research in the country, some key external factors that one needs to consider. What are those water sources and sectoral water use in the country that we deem important, especially from an industrial water use perspective? And then focusing also into some of those selected municipalities in the country, those big metros, looking at their industrial water use. There are some development trends to date when it comes to water sector interventions. I'd like to just give an overview of that within the country, and then obviously the interdependencies between water, energy, and food, like I've indicated, and then go straight into our research portfolio. Our mandate for the CSIR is indeed that of providing directed and multidisciplinary research, including technological innovation, to foster in the national interest and in the fields in which its opinion should receive preference, particularly with regards to industrial and scientific. That, of course, is in cooperation with our principals from both the public and private sectors. And the key issue for us is certainly to make sure that we contribute to the improvement of the quality of life of ordinary South Africans. If we unpack our mandate in a nutshell, it's really just to better utilize the resources of the country, put a lot of emphasis also on manpower training, as well as to improve productive capacity of its population, and also looking at how we improve technical processes and methods to improve industrial production in particular. This is centered within our mandate. And then we also look at how we promote and expand our existing as well as new industries within the country. So our vision is really to see ourselves as accelerators of socioeconomic prosperity in the country, leading through innovation. And our mission is we achieve that through collaboratively innovating and localizing technologies while providing knowledge solutions for the inclusion of and sustainable advancement of industry and society. We do have core values that we're very passionate about in our organization, particularly around industrial innovation and R&D solution that addresses the country's challenges, and here we really pursue excellence in every facet of the organization. We see ourselves as people-centered, as we do care about people within the organization and also within the sectors that we operate, especially as we engage and interact with our stakeholders, because they have certain views that they express, and we would like to believe that we respond to those very strong views and needs by the sector at large. We also want to ensure that we are honest and fair in how we conduct ourselves as far as our RDI profile is concerned, and hence we put a lot of emphasis on how we value integrity. Collaboration is very critical within the sectors. It goes without saying, particularly within the water space, that one can achieve only so much if you do it alone. But in South Africa, typically, most success factors is through our public-private partnerships, particularly when it comes to collaboration in water research. And this is where we put a lot of emphasis as an organization. Our strategic intent and RDI pillars is particularly centered around growth, sustainability, and impact and relevance. How we achieve that is through the various divisions and cluster work that we have reorganized for ourselves as an organization, focusing particularly on the advanced agriculture and food, as well as future production on chemicals, next generation health, as well as future production in the mining space. We're also looking at future production in the manufacturing space, and then some emphasis also on defense and security, where we've developed quite a number of technologies and innovation over many years. Smart mobility is also an area that we're making leeway as far as our RDI work is concerned. And then the smart places is where the CSIR water center is located, and the water and energy center. These are the two centers that are located within the smart places cluster. And we do work quite closely in terms of collaborative work with the sectors out there. The other area is looking at next generation enterprises and institutions, because we also need to see to it that how do we support those particular structures and governance aspects that hamper research, development, and innovation uptake. So our strategic objectives is really centered around our research and development of transformative technologies and how we accelerate their diffusion. We want to improve competitiveness of high-impact industries to support the country's industrialization by collaboratively developing, localizing, and implementing the various technologies that we do develop. We also want to ensure that we drive socioeconomic transformation through our research, development, innovation space in support of development of a capable state. We have recently experienced quite a devastating impact in the eastern parts of the country, when we're experiencing floods. And already in that particular province, we've seen how the different arms of the state and research organizations are coming together to provide that structured support to the state and its various institutions in that particular area to bring about relief due to the floods that has caused devastation. We also want to build and transform human capital and infrastructure. And the CSIR, typically, we do receive a third of our income through parliamentary grant, and then 2/3 of our income is typically generated through research and development, through contract research, both locally and abroad with public and private sectors, as a means to make sure that we diversify our income pool and remain financially. Our partnerships is quite an important aspect of our work that we deem important. And this slide is just to illustrate these partnerships with public research institutions. And it's a makeup of research institutions and also funding agencies. Two of the funding agencies that stand out is particularly in South Africa, we have the Water Research Commission that is particularly concerned with funding research within the water space. And we also have the National Research Foundation that provides research through a research funding agency that cuts across various sectors. We do work very closely with those particular research institutions that serves particular sectors. Whilst the CSIR is multi-sector in its outfit, we do have research organizations that focus on a particular sector, particularly MINTEC, focusing on mining and mineral processing. We have the Agricultural Research Council focusing on agricultural research in particular. Then, of course, we do have the Human Sciences Research Council, the Geoscience Council that we also work very close with, specifically on acid mine drainage, and our geohydrological research in particular. And then we do have the health and medicine, where we also collaborate through our biosciences from within the CSIR. We conduct our research topically in cooperation with principals from public and private sectors. Like I've indicated in here, I'm just giving an illustration of what our public and private sector look like. We have state-owned enterprises, particularly within the energy space, in the form of Eskom. And we also have the Transnet, the rail agencies, and as well as the South African national parks, and Daniel as far as our Air Force is concerned. Development agencies, particularly UNEP and UNDP, and the World Bank Group, where we've conducted quite a number of good joint research and initiatives over the years. And we also have structured partnerships with tertiary education institutions, our government departments, industry, and particularly CESO, and obviously continue to work in a structured manner with some of our funding agencies. And I've listed quite a few there. In addition to the Water Research Commission, we do have the Industrial Development Corporation and the Development Bank of Southern Africa. As far as our international collaboration is concerned, we also do collaborate quite strongly internationally. And we can see particularly in the case of India, where we have collaborated on the UMBI-Flow low-cost Doppler ultrasound device for better primary healthcare services for pregnant women. Our CSIR researchers, together with their counterparts at the Medical Research Council, we have developed this low-cost Doppler ultrasound device, and the rollout thereof is in partnership with our international counterparts in India and Pakistan. We can see there's research collaboration with in Australia as well, in Sweden, France, UK, as far as Europe is concerned, and also on the continent, where we have very strong research with our continental counterparts. From a water perspective, we do have the advantage of the SADC protocol on shared water courses, the South African Development Community, where it somehow streamlined or managed to fast track transboundary research and development when it comes to water management. So that treaty is in particularly supporting us in terms of our research and development agenda. Then in South America, we collaborate also very strongly with colleagues in Brazil, Mexico. We also work with colleagues in Costa Rica and in the United States also, particularly on transport research, high throughout proteomics and cancer research, as well as quantum sensing, to mention a few. I'm not going to go through the full list, but just to give us an indication of the international collaborative manner in which we conduct our research. Context for water in South Africa is typically where the country sees its own approach to water within the global, continental and regional context. And this particular slide provides a snapshot into the international context, where we look at the World Economic Forum that identifies water as a global risk since 2012. It's further recognized through efforts at the continent, and we work particularly through NEPED and the Water Centers of Excellence in terms of water-related research on the continent, and also particularly in the SADC region, where we have helped shape the water research agenda for SADC in particular. We also have a structured water RDI 10-year roadmap that was developed by our Department of Science and Innovation, with particular support from the funding agency, the Water Research Commission, where we have provided also structured inputs in making sure we focused contribution of RDI activities in the areas of water supply and demand is somehow concretized. And the CSIR Compact sets, of course, the directive and mandate for our focus within the water space, as seen in our shareholders compact that we do sign off with the Department of Science and Innovation. With regards to the national context, we do have a national development plan. Chapter 4 of that particular plan is particularly concerned around economic development, where water is recognized as the foundation for socioeconomic activities. And we have not so long ago concluded on National Water and Sanitation Master Plan for the country, where we basically take the strategic imperatives that's outlined in the National Water Resources Strategy and map how those activities can be achieved and identify even organizations and how these should work in partnership with one another to achieve those particular strategic goals. On the slide also, I'm putting out the idea that in order for us to achieve success as far as the Water-Energy-Nexus is concerned, we need to be able to focus on quantification as well as integrated interventions as is required within this particular space, because this is quite a complex interrelated system, Earth, that we're operating with, particularly from a water and energy perspective. And I'm not going to focus much on those particular cycles, ecosystems as well, but just to illustrate the integratedness of what are those key external factors that we need to consider from a water research perspective. First of all, there are key drivers, particularly around urbanization, dwindling water supply in the country, climate change, in particularly from a climate variability perspective, because Southern Africa is to become drier and hotter, and these are the inputs that we continue receiving from our climate colleagues. There's an increased demand due to population and industry growth, which have led to increased water problems, not just in South Africa, but worldwide. And in our case, in particularly, where we're competing for a limited resource, South Africa being a water scarce country, provides for some key challenges. And then, of course, there's the issue of poor water and wastewater infrastructure maintenance that goes with it. Critical sectors that we still consider is that agriculture continues to be quite a big consumer of the world's water, sitting at 70%. In South Africa, agriculture, and not so much the mining industry, account for a massive 62% of water of the country's total usage. But I must also indicate that this percentage is based on allocations in that particular sector. And the CSIR is currently providing structured R&D support to determine the verification and validation of how much of that water is actually currently being used within that particular sector, to see if there are means to free up some of that water to be utilized elsewhere, particularly when it comes to small, medium enterprise sector within the country. Though the percentage of water used within the mining industry is not much, but particularly from a water quality perspective, we need to ensure that we turn the challenges into opportunity as far as the issue of acid mine drainage treatment is concerned. And there we are doing some work from an R&D perspective and some technologies that's been developed there. Now, the sources of water in the country, I think South Africa is typically spoiled in terms of various sources, and I will talk a little bit about this later on when I talk to the intervention trends to date as far as water security is concerned. But typically, groundwater is an area that we consider as critical, that we need to continue exploiting optimally and also in a sound, sustainable manner, because there's quite an over-reliance on surface water as such. And the situation for sub-Saharan Africa is obviously similar, because there is quite enormous opportunity for groundwater to be utilized. The climate change projections suggest that many regions will even become even drier and hotter within those sub-Saharan African regions. And hence, there's an urgency for us to accelerate innovations that make more water available, even for food production. So, in a nutshell, the country's water demand is expected to exceed supply in the region of 70% by 2030. And this is from a recent study by colleagues contributing to the Green Cape strategic initiatives on an annual basis. And over the next 10 years, about 90 billion per year will be needed for water and sanitation infrastructure to keep up with the growing, but also informs the water. Now, if we drill into the water sources and sectoral use within the country, we can clearly see here the over-reliance on surface water, with 13% on return flows. Groundwater is also sitting at 13%. And then other users are sitting at, other sources are sitting at 6%, typically seawater, and of course the issue of water desalination that we continue exploring at various scales within the country. On the right-hand side, we can see agriculture being predominant in terms of water use. And again, like I've indicated, these are allocations as far as those percentages are concerned. And we are in the process of providing detailed information of how much of that allocations are actually being used optimally and efficiently. Typically for municipalities, they're also experiencing quite a lot of challenges when it comes to water loss control. And they're sitting at 27%, 3% in rural areas and 24% in urban. And there we provide also research support to make sure that we address those water losses as experienced at municipal level. The mining industry, mining and other industries, like I've indicated, the percentages, though maybe not big as municipal and agriculture, but a particular focus here is particularly on the quality aspects and remediation through wastewater treatment as far as those particular industries are concerned, particularly for mining, forestation, energy, as well as other industries. So what this slide illustrates is the sectoral breakdown of the top 80% of industrial water users in selected South African municipalities based on volume consumed during 2019. Cities that we have selected on the trends and also the information and data that's forthcoming, and we can see that the automotive industry in the eastern part of the country, Buffalo City, seems to be quite predominant, followed by manufacturing of food, textile industry as well, and food and beverage. The city of Johannesburg in the province where we operate at the moment, we can see there 34% yeast and 70% beverages, electroplating sitting at 15%, dairy products at 13%, manufacturing also 12%, and then the automotive industry is also sitting at 9%. The other area is Tshwane, also in the same province, Gauteng, and we can see that the breweries industry is making up 64%, followed by recycling, beverages, textile, manufacturing of food, and also canning. In the eastern part of the country, in eThekwini and Nelson Mandela Bay, we can see there for eThekwini, its textile industry is leading there in terms of consumption, followed by the petroleum and petroleum products, as well as manufacturing of paper and pulp, which is really quite concentrated within the eastern region of the country as well. And like I've indicated, these are just some of the selected metros. There are others where this is also playing out, but we've just selected these few. Typically, we have 9 provinces within the country, and each province would have such a metro providing structured support to their citizens. The last one is the Nelson Mandela Bay, also in the east, and we can see breweries again is similar to, not similar, but as far as city of Tshwane is concerned, it's leading the pack, followed by the automotive industry, chemicals, dairy products, textile, and tannery as well. So what we do as a CSIR is to ensure that we focus specifically on these top industrial water users in these identified metros. And what we need to ensure is that as far as the water mix is concerned, we look at water reuse interventions in terms of cost downtime period with respect to reduction. And also the opportunities that we see is particularly with regards to legal compliance and enforcement for discharge, where we can provide some technological solutions to industry. There's been some interesting development trends when it comes to water security interventions. What this slides illustrate is that if we look at the intervention measures over the last few years, we can see that we have heavily invested in your day-to-day large interbasin transfer infrastructure. And what the slide basically illustrates is the average incremental cost in terms of rand value per cubic meter in terms of the interventions that we have considered. What is interesting, though, is that we have seemed to focus quite a lot on your most expensive options, whereas there are huge opportunities when it comes to the least expensive options, particularly water use efficiency, water loss control at municipal level, and then also augmentation of your local resources and effluent reuse. And this is really where we want to ensure that we do provide a bit of leeway in terms of those partners in need when it comes to water supply. Desalination is also an area that we have quite invested as a country when it comes to intervention measures. But again, here, looking at this mix, typically in South Africa, it seems like there are choices and options to consider, which sometimes also hampers one's structured approach. Often we find that in an area where there's almost no option but just to consider, for instance, augmentation of local resources, you would then have a focused effort. But when it is so open to various other options, partners often tend to lose sight as to where one actually should really invest. But the point that I just want to make with this particular slide is that we have managed to put quite a lot of effort still when it comes to your most expensive options, and that is your interbasin transfer infrastructure. Now, whilst the Water and Energy Nexus has received much attention in recent times, primarily due to increased energy and water scarcity, along with their interdependence, this figure describes just some of the basic closely linked interdependencies between water and energy. Whereas water is needed to generate energy with different uses along the energy value chain, while energy is needed to convey and treat water across the value chain. But at the same time, the impact of climate change on water availability makes for an even more interesting case with respect to these linkages and interdependencies. And typically in South Africa in 2015, we experienced our worst drought on record since 1904. The impact of the drought was felt nationwide and has resulted in a maize shortage, which is the country's top staple crop. So I'm bringing the water energy food paradigm in here, Che, if you allow me. But this has resulted also in the country having to import maize to meet our local demand.
Harrison, we have 1 minute left.
Yes.
Or two.
Thank you, Chair.
Sure.
So with regards to our research center RDI focus, we can see we're focusing on big data. We also look at technologies to monitor and acquire such data. We also package it around our smart intelligence water systems, as well as the modular systems technologies and integrated designs and processes and systems. I'm sure we will be able to share the presentations from our presenters. So I'm not going to go into much of the detail, but just to flag the particular sectors where we've seen particular challenges and opportunities and how we provide interventions. Here we've identified agriculture and municipal consumption as an area of intervention, particularly through our smart water use application for farmers, centered in the western and southern areas of the country. In terms of municipal consumption, we've also developed a small package wastewater treatment option, as well as the dynamic hydraulic model design and retrofit. We've also looked at the mining and industry in particular, and we can see there the interventions we've considered, particularly around the automized, modularized, and mobile package plants for efficient and viable treatment of mine wastewater qualities, and also looking at a full package groundwater management use systems. That just some of the examples as far as our technologies and interventions is concerned. With regards to water quality, when it comes to pollution and detection and treatment, we look at low-cost rapid pathogen detection technologies, all the way to desalination of inland contaminated water streams for maximum recovery of water. Some more examples, particularly within the water use space, is particularly around the water grid sense system, which is an application to promote smart water use, as well as looking at your water use measurements to analyze water use behavior for more. There are interventions in response to selected water challenges, which I'm not going to go through the detail, but just to highlight that the interventions are centered around smart water and wastewater infrastructure, smart water use, and smart water analytics. And we can see the challenges on the left-hand side, like I've indicated earlier, aging municipal wastewater infrastructure, and from mining operations resulting in problems of acid mine drainage. Also looked at the smart water and wastewater infrastructure. What are those detailed technologies that we consider there? And it's both high cost to low cost nature-based solutions that we do provide in this particular space when it comes to wastewater treatment processes, particularly those that are aimed at circular economy. The smart water and wastewater infrastructure continues to also look at those no formal schemes to supply certain rural communities. And this is where we really want to upscale the development of low cost, ineffective water purification. Regards to smart water use, there are some current and ongoing required interventions as far as water demand is concerned that we need to consider providing solutions, particularly from a decision support perspective, and develop those advanced technologies for water resource management. In terms of the smart water analytics, and this is almost to the end, Chair, if you allow me, is to particularly look at those lab-based services that provides timeous support to water quality challenges as experienced by the sector, both within public and private sector. We do collaborate with partners, like I've indicated, but we also do so in a structured way, particularly to strengthen our joint capacities within those agricultural sector, the energy sector, the chemical sector with Sasol, the mining sector, again, centered around smart water use, smart water, wastewater infrastructure, and water analytics. When it comes to data and information management, not just within South Africa, but also within the SADC region. This is my last slide, Chair. Our interventions is really centered around reduce, remediation, and reuse. focusing on the 3 R's when it comes to water related research within the water. Now, our identified innovations is particularly to reduce raw water dependence and achieve discharge compliance so as to treat wastewater, looking at remediation, reuse, and beneficiate nutrient recovery. The point that I also want to make is that the industrial sector is a space where, it's growing fast from a water perspective, and it provides each industry with not only substantial challenges, but also enormous opportunities in order for us to respond through RDI solutions that we can provide to make sure that water is reduced in the end in terms of the systems that we provide, as well as efficiencies that are being improved. Thank you for indulgence, Chair. This is my last slide, and this is where I'm going to leave it. I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Harrison, for that presentation. I think it was really broad in terms of the role that CSIR is playing and also the South African context within which CSIR is operating. I think you've covered that quite well. And again, we'll park the question